From the team that brought you Angel's Awakening. After 100 years, Henry Hatcher is awoken to fight his mortal enemy. But he is not alone. Guardian Angel.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to a little different episode of Critique Corner with me, Daniel Parker.
And me, DB Fastbinder.
And I have an unfortunate power outage at my house, so I'm at another location. But as you can see, I'm here, and I'm still alive, so all good.
Yep, it's all good. All good.
Yeah. Well, if you are returning, welcome back. If you're new, what we usually do is we'll do a series of reviews. We'll review something new or new-ish, something classic, and this week we both have solo things that we've been watching on our own. And we normally do box office talk, but we kind of decided that other than Deadpool and Wolverine made all the money, there's really nothing much else we can talk about there.
Right. I mean, I've kind of noticed how a lot of our box office talk lately has been, oh, that did better than expected.
Yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing is that, well, clearly Marvel doesn't want us to focus too much on Wolverine and Deadpool because the weekend had just finished. The headlines about them making box office records for R-rated movies had barely gone out the door.
Yeah.
They announced this.
Yes, they made this odd announcement here.
He is not Iron Man.
No, he is Dr. Doom.
So, Daniel, when I linked you the Twitter post about this, what was your immediate reaction?
My immediate reaction was to dust off an old classic. Is this an out of season April Fool's joke?
Yes. All right. So in case you've been living under a rock, they decided to back up the Brinks truck and pay Robert Downey Jr. to come back to the MCU in an attempt to save it, and he is playing Dr. Doom.
Yeah. Which I still don't know how they're going to pull this off.
Also, hi, Chengus.
Oh yeah, hey Chengus. Yes, we'll be getting to that here in a little bit.
That's going to be our first review, but so all right. So let's talk about this. This is clearly meaning that multiverse shenanigans are still happening, I would think.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You might say, aren't people constantly showing that they're tired of the multiverse? I would counter, are they?
Yes.
Because when you think about it, in phases 4 and 5, the Marvel movies that have been the most successful are the ones that did lean into the multiverse.
Yeah. Spider-Man: No Way Home.
Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah. And
Deadpool, Wolverine.
Yeah. Yes, and so clearly the bigwigs over in Marvel think that that's what people want.
Right. Which it's where you could get into real trouble if you just look at the data without actually applying any analysis to it. Because what's really going on is that the first off, plenty of flopped projects also invoked the multiverse, like the Marvels ended with their X-Men cameo.
Yeah.
Ant-Man leaned heavily into there being a whole bunch of different versions of Kang.
Yeah.
Who has now been unceremoniously Kang? What are you talking about? There never was a Kang. Shut up.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: it's dangerous. Like, as much as people clearly didn't care about Kang, just shuffling him off and not doing anything with him is dangerous because the few people who were watching everything religiously, you've now just told them, by the way, if something doesn't work out, we're just going to abandon it. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, ridiculous.
Yep. But let's talk about Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom in specific.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, like if he's Victor Von Doom or if he's like another version of Tony Stark who becomes Doctor Doom.
Right. Um, so I've heard various speculations. One speculation is that he's like an alternate version of Tony who has been possessed by Doctor Doom,
Uh,
which is a possibility.
yeah, yeah.
People did point to, of course, you can tell who actually reads the comic books because they apparently did a what if story called "Demon in the Armor," where Doctor Doom did actually possess Tony's body. But there's an alternate universe where they were call it like Tony was his college roommate instead of Reed,
Oh, yeah.
and that happened for some reason.
Hmm,
But like that's a story from like 5 years ago tops. So it,
yeah,
it strikes me as, was the story fed to Marvel to try to set the groundwork for it well in advance?
probably. Yeah, yeah,
Um, like in a vacuum, imagine that you had an alternate universe where Robert Downey Jr. was never Iron Man, and somebody else had been Iron Man. The character lived and died, and as Fantastic Four is getting integrated into Marvel, Robert Downey Jr. is tapped to play Doctor Doom.
yeah,
I think in that vacuum, uh, he's proven to have enough range that I think he could pull it off.
yeah, yeah. I think so too. Yeah,
But it would be like it's confusing enough when you have the same actor with multiple characters when they're minor parts.
yeah, yeah. And the MCU has done that, by the way. They did that with I can't remember the actress's name, but she was in Eternals, and then but before that, she was in Captain Marvel as one of the aliens. So, like,
Okay.
yeah.
Was Jaimon Hansu in two Marvel things too?
I think he was just in Guardians.
Or was he in two DC things? I think he might have, because he was definitely in the Shazam movies, but I think he was also.
Right. I can't remember.
Maybe I'm just getting twisted because he was also in Rebel Moon.
Probably, yeah, that might be it.
But you don't do that with major characters. It's kind of like if they cast Henry Cavill in the new DC universe to play opposite Superman as, I don't know, Zod or something like that.
Yeah,
You're going to confuse the normies.
yeah,
And it's a needless confusion.
yes,
Now,
yeah.
as I'm looking at this is clearly not going to be the final costume. This is just a comfortable-ish suit that evokes the costume that RDJ can wear to the convention.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure it'll be more. It'll probably be more in line with the comic book representation.
Right. The other problem is that, well, on the one hand, he could probably pull out the roll off. They're not going to let him hide his face, and they're not going to. And the thing with Doctor Doom is that there are a couple different variants of what's wrong with his face.
Hmm.
I've heard like in some continuities that there's actually like he just has a small scar on his face from his failed experiment, but he covers his face because it is a constant reminder that Reed was right, even though it's like a small scratch.
Oh, okay.
In other things, his face is so horrifying that he took off his mask and made somebody who himself had a scarred face like just quaver in terror.
Uh, and and Ninja, yeah, yeah.
No.
Oh,
Then the third version, which I almost like, just because it is very fitting for somebody as vainglorious as Doom, is that it started off as a small scar, But when the monks in Tibet made him the mask to cover his face, he didn't wait for it to properly cool down and ended up,
Melted to his face.
yeah. Um, but they're never going to let they have allegedly paid RDJ more than $100 million plus a bunch of perks to coming back for 3 movies.
Oh, well, that explains why he came back.
Yes, you are not going to let him be maskless for these movies.
Right. Yeah.
And the other thing is that by doing this, you have guaranteed that Doctor Doom is going to be more of a Spider-Man thing than a Fantastic Four thing.
Yeah.
Because it seems like they also kind of announced the Fantastic Four. Some people have taken issue with the new title, "Fly Me to the Moon."
Mm.
It's a little bit wordy, but it does kind of make sense. Like you're setting it in the space race. That's clearly the Fantastic Four's natural home.
Yeah. Although I'm a little surprised that I wonder if they had to pay off Sinatra's estate to call it that.
Good question. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
But it's from the sounds of it, they're probably going to get time lost and show up in the present, which explains why. Anything in the MCU, you have to explain. Okay, where were you during the snap, and why didn't you show up to help?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's one of the critical problems with the Eternals, especially because the Eternals were supposed to be guardians of the whole human race.
Yeah, and they
Or should I
just
say, guardians of the planet, trying to make humanity flourish.
yeah, and they were just kind of like, where were you during the snap? The what now? I don't know what you're talking about.
And Ninja says apparently it's technically in an alternate Earth where the 1950s remained to the modern day.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, either way.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm too enthused by this. Like
Yeah.
it seems like that's the typical reaction online.
Yeah. Very meh. Or they're like Ninja. Hell no.
Right. Like you have invited more problems than you have solved with this idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you could definitely see it as an act of desperation on the part of Marvel.
And it's weird that they chose to do this the day after Deadpool and Wolverine dropped and made all the money.
Yeah.
But that's because and I talked with somebody at work who had seen it. I intend to. I just haven't gotten around to it yet.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, like it does sound like it's like a love letter and swan song to the Fox era of Marvel stuff.
Okay.
So like, what got Kickstarted with Blade and onward,
Oh, okay.
which means that like you don't really have another. This is like another take at the across the Spider-Man 3 thing.
Yeah.
Like you don't have that many, or you have no other continuities that you can nostalgia mine like this.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess it makes sense they would want to look forward, but yeah, like,
Yeah.
so my bias, not enthused by the MCU anymore anyway.
Mhm.
Frankly, the MCU movies I have seen post Endgame have not wowed me at all. They've been meh at best, and I don't think this is a sign of improvement.
Yeah. No, I don't either. Yeah.
So let that set the tone for the rest of today for the most part, because
Yes.
the meh train continues and it rides into the station at Ghostbusters Frozen Empire.
Yeah. So this finally dropped on Netflix last week or the week before. And it's the follow up to Afterlife, and I had a really hard time liking this movie.
Right. I would struggle to actually call it bad. It's almost more just bland than anything else.
Yeah, it was bland. Yeah, and I, we were talking kind of like about it, as we were watching it, and we kind of had a hard time pinning down just who like the quote unquote main character is, because it just kind of bounces around different people for the most part.
Right. And a movie with an ensemble cast can work, but the previous movie was very focused on what's her name?
Oh, what is her name?
This is not a good sign.
Yeah,
Uh,
oh God, what was, yeah, it's,
I'm pulling up IMDb. Don't worry.
yeah,
Uh, it's here.
it's Egon's granddaughter.
Phoebe Spengler.
Yeah, Phoebe, or,
That's
yeah,
right, Phoebe. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. So Phoebe was very much the focus of the previous movie,
yeah,
since she was, the most like her departed grandfather. Like, her brother was around, but he clearly had different traits than she did,
hmm,
and she was kind of like the driving force behind a lot of it.
yeah, and of course the fact that she even, you know, resembled him in greatly
Yeah.
with the hair and the glasses, and
Right. And the previous movie kind of it worked well as a love letter to the previous parts of the franchise. And it also kind of worked on that sort of 80s. It almost felt like a Goonies movie than a Ghostbusters movie with a group of kids trying to solve the problem.
right, yeah, yeah, and it was kind of like, I think it kind of, they tried to kind of tie it with like, like our generation that grew up with the cartoon show, the real Ghostbusters, and we are like, oh, well, I want to be a Ghostbuster when I'm a kid, and then they showed the
Yep.
kids being Ghostbusters. Yeah,
Right. It, it was kind of a one-shot nostalgia bait, and like I ate the bait happily, even though, truth be told, I don't have that much nostalgia for the Ghostbusters because I watched a few episodes of the cartoon back in the day, drank plenty of Ecto Cooler, uh,
yeah,
but I never really saw the movie until I was older, and I thought it was just kind of all right, which I know is heresy, but
yes, heretic, heretic, heretic.
so I would say the fact that the previous movie made me care at all was like a mark in its favor.
Yeah. Plus, it was directed by Jason Reitman, the son of Ivan Reitman, who directed the first two movies.
Yeah, whereas this one's directed by Gil Keenan, which is not a name that I recognize.
Yeah, I didn't
Although
recognize
the
it either.
although the Reitmans were involved with writing the movie.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so this guy's movies he's known for are Monster House, City of Ember. Then
I think.
he
Yeah.
took some time off. Poltergeist, Scream the TV series, A Boy Called Christmas.
Ooh, not a great filmography there.
No, I would say so. To kind of break down I think we're kind of delaying talking about the plot a bit because
Yeah,
it's weirdly it's a bit overstuffed.
it is. Yeah.
I think the problem they had was that they probably had binding contracts with the kid characters introduced in the previous movie that they had to be included. Like this is a 3 movie deal or whatever, and they had to be
Yeah.
included. But they also wanted to make sure that the living Ghostbusters were around too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Ray and I would say, yeah, like Dan Aykroyd had a much larger role in this movie than he did in Afterlife.
Right, and you also have Ernie Hudson basically being the Nick Fury of this Ghost Enterprises or whatever they call it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're a big Bill Murray fan and you're hoping to see a lot of him in this movie, you're going to be very disappointed.
Yeah, no, he's barely in this thing.
Yeah.
You get more of Janine than you do of Peter.
Yeah.
um, so you know what? Okay, so non-spoiler thoughts. If you really, really loved the previous one, you really want to see where the characters were going, give this one a watch.
Yeah.
There's some neat special effects that we'll get into more detail on later. It's not hateable. It's just like it very much feels like a movie you would turn on in the background while you're doing other things.
Yeah. And Ninja asks if the movie was more of a nostalgia fest than the last one. Not so much, I don't think.
No, I would say no. It like it brought in some familiar elements, but it didn't really do much with them.
Yeah, they did bring back Walter Peck.
Right? Who's gone from being the head of the EPA to the mayor?
Yeah, which, ugh. Well, that actually kind of fits with the way our government works.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess we should get into the plot.
Yeah.
So the movie picks up 2 years after the previous movie.
Yep.
Was it 2 or 3 years? I think it was 2 years.
Uh,
Um,
Some small number of years, and
yes, yeah.
they've taken up residence in the old firehouse and are out busting ghosts.
Right. Yeah. And the ghost busting team consists of Paul Rudd's character, Gary, and then of course the Spangler, uh, Kelly Spangler,
Um,
Egon's daughter, the mom, and then the two kids, Phoebe and Trevor. And Trevor's played by Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things, which is kind of interesting because so he's been not one but two '80s nostalgia things.
yeah.
And he actually in season 2 of the show, he and the and his little group of friends, they actually win as Ghostbusters on Halloween. So yeah, but yeah, so they're out busting ghosts, and then things don't go well. They cause some damage, and Walter Peck's not happy, and then they find out, of course, Phoebe is 15, so she's underage and she can't be doing ghost busting.
Right. It makes sense. It's one of those things where, uh, you don't necessarily want to think about it because you're just supposed to be enjoying the adventure. But yeah, realistically, it's horribly irresponsible to let her go out and bust ghosts,
Yeah.
even though she has a talent for it. Then, when they're turning in their most recent ghost capture, they discover that the firehouse has reached capacity.
Yes, which I've always wondered about, by the way. Like, just how much storage space is in that thing?
Right, like the ghosts clearly can occupy real space. Like, do they take up space when they're captured? Question mark.
Yeah.
And so there's like multiple subplots going on here. Like each character gets a thing,
Mhm.
or half a thing. So I guess let's talk about Phoebe, the seeming main character. She's goes off and is alone, and she runs into a ghost named Melody, played by Emily Ann Lind, or Alan Lind, excuse me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they become friends? Question mark.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic between those two.
Well, the thing is that Phoebe's character, I think, is clearly being played as some flavor of being on the spectrum and just like awkward in general. It's like busting ghosts is her thing,
Yeah. Yeah, and science and mechanics, yeah.
right? It's like suddenly losing those leaves her a bit adrift. And then she runs into this ghost who is just like she's like, has a 1920s style. So they try to do this thing where they are buddies? Question mark.
Yeah.
But like I don't really feel any chemistry between them. Some people interpreted it as a romantic relationship, though apparently that's been clarified by the filmmakers that they were just close friends. I I think that the reason that some people outside of shippers seeing relationships everywhere,
Yeah.
uh, I think the reason that some people might have seen a romantic thing is that otherwise it's like, what do these two have in common with each other?
Yeah, not a whole hell of a lot.
Right, like, and you do eventually figure out that Melody is working with the villains to try and trap her,
Mhm.
or I should say, to try to get like access to the good guys.
Yeah.
So that is like plot one. Plot two is, I don't even want to call it a plot or a subplot. Series of events that happens is Trevor trying to catch Slimer, because remember Slimer?
Yeah, he's still in the firehouse. Yeah, yeah,
This
yeah,
really doesn't go anywhere, though Slimer does show up in the last act. So yeah.
yeah, yeah,
There's also a whole bunch of little marshmallow Stay Puff people, which are involved with plot three, which is, in my opinion, the best part of the movie, which is Dan Aykroyd running a he's running a curio shop, supernatural shop,
yeah,
with Logan Kim, aka Podcast from the previous movie, as his live-in slave labor, I guess you would call him.
yeah. Intern slash producer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
his YouTube channel,
yeah,
and yeah, that had some funny bits in it.
yeah, yeah. I like the word when Ray's like, "Oh, and my producer wants me to remind you to like and subscribe."
Yeah, yeah. I would say that Dan is the best part of this movie, just because he brings his own weird on the spectrum anti-charm to it's he is weird. Like if I was to describe Dan Aykroyd to you, it would always sound kind of insulting, but I always like him when he shows up.
Yeah,
So it's like there are just some people who have a weird sort of it's like the charisma wraps around so far that you pass zero and come back into positive again.
yeah. Yeah, and well, yeah, and this is like his wheelhouse too, because he's really into all that paranormal ghost stuff. You know, that's his bread and butter. So yeah, that's he's really in his element in this movie.
Yeah. Uh, and when they discover that the house has been, or that the firehouse is starting to run out of capacity, they bring in Ernie Hudson, which introduces the fourth element of the movie, which is basically the setup for the larger ghost universe that they're trying to make happen.
Yeah, yeah, they've got a bigger containment unit for the ghosts, and they've got them in cells, and they're studying them like lab animals, and yeah.
In a setup that clearly nothing is going to escape. No, no, that would be crazy talk. What are you talking
Right,
about?
right, yeah, yeah.
Like it's very predictable, and it feels like the people who wrote the movie watched the Avengers a few too many times as like their example of how to set up a cinematic universe.
Yeah, yeah, and they kind of putting the kind of getting a little ahead of themselves. Much the same way with the Tom Cruise Mummy movie that we watched for the show not a few months back.
Yeah, like, I would say this is better than that, but that's partially because they had the previous movie to draw on. There are just too many characters. Like Celeste O'Connor's character, Lucky from the previous movie, she just
Yeah,
has nothing to do.
yeah,
She's just part of Ernie Hudson's workplace, and that is the extent of her character.
yeah. And then you also had that British guy.
Oh yeah, I keep forgetting him.
Yeah, he's just kind of there.
Uh, and then the fifth element is you have Kumail Nanjiani as Nadim, who is just a generally unlikable character.
Yeah,
Uh, he is introduced to the story where he is trying to sell some of his grandmother's knickknacks to Dan Aykroyd for surprisingly small amounts of money.
yes, yeah, and amongst them is this orb, uh, which turns out to be like a almost like a containment unit for a very powerful spirit, and it's this like was a Sumerian god or something. I can't remember what he
Like
was.
yeah, like South Asian god
South Asian
who
god.
was
Yeah.
who like was the god of frost, and he was going to destroy the world until a bunch of basically firebenders showed up, and Nadim is like the last of them.
Yes. Yeah. And he shows off the this little hidden room in his grandmother's apartment, and I will say the look of it kind of reminded me of Hellraiser. Some of the patterns and everything. I'm like, oh, hopefully
Yeah,
there's no puzzle box in there.
yeah, it's like a big chunk of the last part of the movie is him trying to learn to firebend so they can help fight off this monster.
Yeah, yeah,
But the character himself is just, like I said, unlikable because he's just vaguely slimy or
yeah,
vaguely like he's vaguely shallow and greedy. and I could see like the character working if he'd had more time to develop.
Yeah, yeah. Although I'll be honest, I don't really think he's all that funny.
The actor, yeah, like
The actor, yeah,
his performance feels like it's on the verge of comedic, but not quite there in this movie.
yeah,
Of course, you also suffered through the Eternals, which he was apparently in.
yeah. He was in that one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That might be prejudicing me a bit against him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of prejudice, Patton Oswalt is in this movie. I keep forgetting he was in this movie.
Well, yeah, he's just in the one part of the movie, and he's just not really. It's kind of it was a bit of that was the exposition dump about the bad guy, the main villain.
Yeah. So now there's some other weirdness too. Like at one point, Phoebe's plotline is about trying to like get back into her own, but also some family drama because Paul Rudd is her stepdad basically. And
Mhm.
sorry, I fell asleep there just thinking about
Yeah, yeah,
it. And like she feels like she's isolated, so at one point she decides, I'll go be a ghost with Melody. Like, isn't that called suicide? No, we have this machine that extracts ghosts from objects, so clearly it'll work on a person.
yeah, yeah. That part was odd. I didn't like that at all.
No, especially
Yeah,
because there's no lasting consequences of it besides this being used to unlock the monster.
yeah,
So, and that's the long and short of the movie. There's like now let's get into where the movie's strengths really lie. I feel like this is a pretty good special effects showcase.
yeah. It is. Yeah, yeah. The ghosts have gotten a lot better, obviously, as the CGI has improved over the last 40 years since the first movie, as well as like the look of the proton streams and everything. Yeah.
Yep. And they have some clever ghost ideas, like this one that just possesses inanimate objects
Oh yeah,
that just bounces around between them.
yeah,
Um, that dragon-looking thing there on the poster is it's fairly cool. It
yeah,
shows up a couple of times. It has a neat sort of Asian dragon character design.
yeah, yeah,
When they have the exposition dump about the ancient ice god, I liked the sort of faux stop motion style they were using for the cave drawings they were using to, or cave drawings or hieroglyphs or whatever you want to call them
yeah,
that they were using to show things off.
yeah, yeah. That was cool. Yeah,
Uh, And then I thought the nicest effect was when the part of the lore of the ice god was that his horns have been ripped off, and as he gets them back on his head, the way they shift around kind of looked like it was 80s stop motion, like a Phil Tippin type thing.
yeah, 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 yeah. I was impressed with that part aspect of the movie. Yeah,
Right, just the writing set it or let it down, and like I think it's because they were trying to, like we said before, they're trying to do too much because we left out the fact that the surviving original Ghostbusters plus Janine are all over the place and they unite for one last time to help out with the last fight.
yeah, and they don't really do that much.
No, one could argue that wait, the previous movie was the passing of the torch movie, and while Dan Aykroyd was the best part of this movie,
Mhm.
did he really need to be there?
Yeah, well, the only reason they were there was to try to they did something to do something with the chamber, the ghost where the ghosts were being kept, the
Right,
vault.
but
Yeah.
but I think that the trouble is that the original or the surviving Ghostbusters, minus Bill Murray, who was barely in it,
Mm.
they basically ate up a lot of space in the movie that should have gone to the other characters.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you don't really know anything about Paul Rudd that you didn't know in the previous movie, or Carrie Coon's character, or Finn for that matter. You just know he doesn't like Slimer. So
Yeah. Yeah, they were definitely trying to keep Phoebe as the main character, and it just wasn't. But there was just so many other elements to it that she was it was just she was getting drowned out from it, drowned out from all of them.
yeah. Now, I will say I understand having Dan have a major role because Ghostbusters is his baby. It's
Mhm.
like as long as he's still kicking and able to act in movies, giving him a big cameo part like this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just that they had too many elements and they needed to subtract a few to make it really work.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I would say overall, yeah, pretty disappointing, and as as Ching has pointed out uh, earlier, pretty mid.
Yeah, that's kind of the worst thing you could be. Like, people are still talking about Batman v Superman or the Snyder Cut or the less about Rebel Moon. I haven't seen anybody bother to do like any sort of review of the director's cuts that because I think the first one has already dropped.
Oh, really?
Because I think I saw like Netflix was telling me that the second director's cut of Rebel Moon was dropping,
uh,
or the second half. So I guess there is a shelf life for cringe.
yeah,
And I,
yeah,
but I think this is just going to be totally forgotten. And with the reception this got, I don't know that the cold shoulder, if you will.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
uh, I don't know that they'll necessarily get another swing at the bat.
yeah. Especially given the age of the original Ghostbusters actors. I mean, I think Murray and well, I don't know how I think Murray's like in his early. Murray and Aykroyd, I think, are in their early 70s, but like Ernie Hudson, I want to say is like in his late 70s.
Yeah, I mean he looks good for his age,
He
but
does, yeah. But yeah, yeah, they really dropped the ball on this one, which is unfortunate.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can move on from this to a slightly more. Actually, I guess there are still dead things involved, so there's a little bit of a connective tissue.
Yeah.
So, Bone Tomahawk.
Yes. So yeah, this was my independent movie that I watched. Uh, it's when I saw it on I'd heard about it before, but I didn't know anything about it. And then I saw it on Netflix and I read the description, and I thought, oh, it kind of reminded me of 13th Warrior, but it was being the Old West. So I decided to give it a watch, and ugh. uh, so uh, there are aspects of it I thought were really good, but overall it wasn't like not the best movie, or it's just wasn't. I didn't really enjoy it that much.
Mhm.
Um, so the basic plot of the movie is, and I'm gonna pull IMDb up on my phone so that I can get everything situating so I know who everybody is. So the movie takes place in a town called uh, Blessed Hope, I think is the name of the town. Something
Mhm.
Hope. Um, Not really sure which state it's in. I want to say it's like probably like Arizona or maybe uh, maybe Colorado. Um,
Looks like it's firmly in the desert just based on the cover there.
yeah, it is. Yeah. And so the movie starts off, and when I will say when the movie starts, I thought, okay, I'm in for something really, really gut wrenching here, and it opens with these two bandits. One of them was played by David Arquette, and the opening shot is David Arquette just cutting a guy's throat, laying on the ground.
Mm.
They ambush these guys that are sleeping, and they just cut their throats, and because they're going to steal whatever they have. And the other guy, I don't know who the actor's name was, but he's very well spoken, and they kind of have this like bantering back and forth, and so then they have to flee where they just were, and they end up in this burial ground, sacred burial ground, which looks like a Native American burial ground, and they basically they desecrate it by walking across it, and then the well-spoken bandit, he comes across a native who's just like covered in like sediment and stuff, and he just and so then David Arquette runs off, and that's when he runs off to the town, and he's in the saloon, and a lot of people are kind of like, oh, it's what's this guy's deal? So they get the sheriff, which is Sheriff Hunt. That's Kurt Russell, and the guy, and of course David Arquette tries to leave, and then Russell shoots him in the leg, and they take him off to jail. But then they can't get the doctor because he's passed out drunk. So they have to go to this nurse that's in town, and her name's Samantha, and of course she's tending to her husband, who's played by Patrick Wilson. His name is Arthur, and Patrick Wilson, he was Night Owl in Watchmen, and he's been in like the Conjuring movies and the Insidious movies, so he's mainly known for horror. But she's she's taking care of him because he broke his leg. And then, of course, as they're in the jail that night, that's when this group of natives attack, and they take Samantha, and they take the Drifter, and they take a young deputy who was there. So now Kurt Russell has to basically put a posse together to go and to go rescue them from these natives. But the issue is they talk to another Native American who's living in the town, and he's like, yeah, these guys are bad news. they're inbred, they're cannibals. You go anywhere near them, they're going to kill you. So you have that setup, and it's like, yeah. So you have that setup, and I'm kind of like, okay, I mean, now early on in there, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm kind of into it, but the problem I was having with it was really slow paced. Yeah, and then when they set off to to this native tribes camp area, like, it is really slow. Like, it's just this movie's over 2 hours. They could have easily cut 30-40 minutes out of it. It could have been a 90-minute movie.
So it's kind of the issue where I feel like streaming movies in particular, because the success is measured on minutes watched, it's in everybody's interest not to be brief.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, it's and I think what kind of adds to it adds to the slow pace, and it's weird because it's this aspect of the movie is a detriment, but it's also clever. It also kind of works with the tone of the movie, and there's no score. There's no musical accompaniment. So I mean, everything is just, it's natural sound, and the other and it's just, so I think that kind of, so there, you don't have those musical cues about what's going to happen.
Okay, it's like surprises are actually surprising.
Yeah, they are. And there are quite a few of them in this. But yeah, it's really, it starts off really good. It's very slow in the middle, and then it kind of picks up a little bit near the beginning of the third act, and then it kind of slows down again, and then it picks up again. It's
okay.
Yeah. I will also say too that it is very violent. I mean, it is brutally violent. Like what these natives do to the young deputy that they kidnap is
okay. So it almost sounds like it's more of a Western horror than anything else, like, more than a Western action.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, very much. Actually, I think it's even categorized that way on Netflix as Western horror.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I think like I said, the biggest problem I had with it was that it is just so it's slow and and then when the actions does start to happen, you really don't get a whole lot of time to breathe because because in 1 minute they'll kind of be doing something, and then the next second a character gets shot with an arrow or takes a hatchet to the to the hand, and it's very quick, which realistic for how it happens in real life, but of course it's a movie, so it's got to be a little more, has to be a little bit more tension, but it's
So you're almost saying this movie is like the description of war as long periods of boredom broken up by brief moments of terror.
pretty much, yeah. That's a good way of describing it. Yeah. um I will say, if you're a fan of the Western genre, you might get something out of it, just because aesthetically it's really good. I mean, it looks like the Old West. I mean, they did a really good job recreating it. um it's natural lighting too, for the most
Okay.
part. Yeah, like they don't, I mean, there's no set lights or anything like that, so that part of it's really good, but it's just, I just couldn't get over how slow it was. It's just, I mean, and even the stuff like, because usually in those slow parts, that's when you're kind of do like character development. You try to
Right.
build them up, but they really didn't do that very well.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was just really, yeah, but it's all right. It's not great, but I mean, yeah,
So I mean, just part of it is like you didn't end up having to buy a ticket for it, so you probably feel less cheated just because, well, I'm already paying for Netflix anyway.
that's true. Yeah, my only problem is that, like I said, I thought it was too long. I mean,
Mhm.
this movie could have easily been 90 to 100 minutes, and you wouldn't have lost anything. Yeah.
Uh, well, I don't have much to add because it doesn't really sound like it's my genre. But
Yeah.
speaking of things that are improved by brevity,
Yes.
so my review sticks out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of our topics this week.
Yeah.
I was on Crunchyroll the other night and I said, I feel like just watching something. And I'm scrolling through, and I see this one called "The Magical Girl and the Evil Lieutenant Used to Be Arch Enemies."
Mm.
And I say, you know what? This will probably be bad, but let's give it a go.
Yeah.
So the first thing I noticed before anything else was that it actually is only 12-minute episodes,
Hmm.
which is usually an odd choice. Like usually anime are, of course, set up for the half-hour time slot on TV,
Right. Yeah.
but you do occasionally get some cursed things that are like there are some. If you go digging in Crunchyroll's back catalog, there are like some 2-minute anime that are literally like 2 to 3 minutes long, and they have a theme song. It's like all the dialogue is actually sped up, and God help you if you're trying to read the subtitles.
Oh yeah.
But 12, I've actually seen a couple of 12-minute anime where it worked out. If you ever heard of the series Dagashi Kashi, which is basically just a dumb fan service comedy about a guy who ends up getting a part-time, or no, he owns the Japanese candy store, and you have this the daughter of an executive at this huge conglomerate who's trying to convince him to stick with the family business even though he hates it.
Right. Yeah.
It's like every episode is just like she shows up and demonstrates multiple candies over the course of the episode. It's already kind of like in short bursts. It's like the first season, the half-hour episodes felt too long. In the second season, they shortened it down to 15-minute episodes, and
Mhm.
suddenly it like was much snappier.
Yeah.
This series, I think, benefits similarly from being able to not outstay its welcome every week.
Hmm. Okay.
So the title is it's actually, I would say, it's mildly misleading because you're kind of seeing the process of them not being arch enemies anymore.
Mm.
So you have the classic magical girl setup. You have this girl who I believe is high school age or older, who she transforms into a magical girl to fight evil. Um, she is not really the point of view character. The point of view character is the magical girl is her name is Byakuya, and the main guy there is named Mira, and Mira is part of a classic. Not even a classic magical girl army. He's clearly based on Super Sentai. They even have enemies that kind of look like you know how in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers they had the putties.
Yeah, yeah.
These were like in the classic mold of like a old Kamen Rider or Super Sentai show where you had like these black, like all black kind of skeleton themed baddies.
Okay.
And in the fans of that genre, they call them kikis because usually they're going kiki kiki kiki, right? Well, this one they take it to another level, and their entire language is just like kiki 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 kiki.
It's just
As they're talking to this guy who is like one of the evil council of evil.
yeah.
And there are a bunch of other generals who are various anime stereotypes, but what you find out is that this guy has clearly fallen head over heels for the magical girl.
Yeah.
Like he just cannot stop geeking out over how cute she is and trying to resist it. And it's all very cute, and a lot of the comedy it's not exactly highbrow, but the animation sells the joke very well.
Okay.
So it's like I don't know that this was an actual joke, but I'm just going to make one up. It's like I brought you some sweets, not because I like you or anything, Bababaka.
Yeah.
It's just that you told me that you haven't eaten for a couple of days, and I can't have my arch nemesis being too weak to fight.
Yeah.
So she's kind of she has a very how to put it. She's very passive. She's also very strong.
Uh,
So she just kind of puts up with things and is the type of person who needs strong guidance, which means that her magical girl familiar is taking a complete advantage of her.
Oh
Just
yeah.
living off of her.
Yeah. And it just says, yeah, so he's a tsundere.
Very much so.
Yeah.
By the third episode, which is as far as I had watched, because that's all they had available at the time, although there is now a fourth episode since I did so earlier this week. By the third episode, they're clearly like becoming more friendly, which is starting to cause him problems because the evil overlord assigns somebody else to help him at the end of the third episode. Yeah, oh, you haven't taken out the magical girl yet. We're assigning such and such to help you out.
Oh no.
Now, is this a new concept? No, there have actually been a couple of anime recently that were similar. I can't think of the name of it, but there was one where it was literally the evil princess of the identical sort of magical girl / Kamen Rider / Super Sentai army having a thing with the Red Ranger.
Yeah.
But this is it's very cute. There are actually a couple of comedic swerves. The comedy can be slightly perverted at times, so not for the kiddos.
Yeah.
Not for kids.
Not for kids.
To bring up the meme from last week.
Yes.
And I would say that at 12 minutes long, if you watch one episode and hate it, you haven't lost a whole lot.
Yeah.
So I will give this a firm recommend with the understanding that it's very silly and tropey.
Yeah. Okay.
But it wears its influence as well.
Yeah. Well, good. That's good to hear.
Yes. Now, speaking of things that don't necessarily wear its influences as well, this week I inflicted upon us Necessary Roughness.
Yes.
So, if you had asked me last week, I would have told you in full honesty that I had never seen this movie before. And that seemed very strange to me because I remember in the shelf in the garage where we kept our VHSs and DVDs growing up.
Yeah.
This one was like always in a very prominent spot. And I remember just thinking to myself, I wonder why I've never gotten around to watching this. Uh, and as I watched it, I realized, no, I've at least been in the room while this has been shown several times.
Yeah.
Because there are elements here that are suddenly very familiar, but there are other parts that just aren't. So I think I'm forced to conclude I have technically seen this movie, but it just left zero impact on me.
Yeah, it's easy to it's a movie that's easy to forget. I will say that. Yeah. Um
And no, it is not Cheng. Chengus asks if it, because I could see where you get this idea from the cover. It
yeah.
is not a takedown of sports movies in the sense of like a scary movie or whatnot.
No, it's more in line with The Replacements, if anyone has ever seen that one. With Keanu Reeves and Gene Hackman. It's more like that.
It's also like the movie Major League.
Oh yes, Major League, yeah.
Uh, which is funny because the first Major League movie came out 2 years before this one, also by Paramount. And you almost wonder if the impetus for this was some studio bigwig going, well, we made some good money off of Major League. Let's try the same formula, but for football.
Yeah, and it mixed results. um, but yeah, so to kind of, I guess, get into the plot of the movie. So the movie starts off. We meet oh God, what Blake was his name, last name, Paul Blake, who's played by Scott Bakula, and he's working on his farm and he's throwing the football around because he played quarterback in high school. And I was getting a lot of Uncle Rico vibes from that whole
Oh
sequence.
no, I didn't even think of that, but you're right. Right. Basically, the poor guy, his dad died of, I believe, a heart attack when he was in late high school.
Yeah,
And so he never got to go to college and pursue his football dreams. He's kind of, torn up by, what could have been,
yeah,
even as he's running the family business, which is being a rancher.
yeah, and we should probably mention it. It takes place in Texas. Um,
Yes. Where
and
football is the state religion.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, yeah. I lived in Texas for 17 years. I can confirm this. Yeah. So then we then get to the overall issue, which is that the school of Texas State University, which there is a Texas State University.
There,
Uh,
well, there's more of a wrinkle to it than that.
oh
There
yeah.
is a Texas State University now. When the movie came out, there was not, but a school got renamed apparently.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it's in San Marcos, which is halfway between Austin and San Antonio.
Hmm.
Uh, Drove through it many times. Um, and Well, although they actually filmed this movie in at the University of North Texas, which is in Denton, uh, and that's about, I think it's about an hour north of Dallas.
Hmm.
Um, and I believe the color scheme of that school is green and white, so kind of fits. But anyway, so Texas State has been hit with a bunch of NCAA sanctions, a
They were
la
just ridiculously corrupt.
yes, they were ridiculously corrupt. Yeah, they made SMU look look like Boy Scouts. Because I'm assuming that was the basis for all of that, was what happened at SMU. You and so their entire football team gets kicked off, and so they have to rebuild their team, but they can only use students from the current student body. And of course, I think only one guy from the football team actually survived being kicked off the team.
Right. And and so part of the movie is, and you also have, as the antagonist, you had Larry
Oh,
Miller playing Dean Philip Elias. Larry
yes.
Miller, of course, being this movie is full of a bunch of people who aren't headliners by any stretch of the imagination, but you know who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. If you watched Seinfeld, he was the evil doorman.
Yeah, and he's also been like he's just like a sort of a stuffed shirt villain in at least a few movies I've seen. I just can't place
Yeah.
any of them because, like a lot of elements of this movie, he's not particularly memorable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because he doesn't like having the football team around because he thinks it's like a
It's
lot of
puerile and
yeah, he's one of these stodgy academics. But yeah, so then the president of Texas State, who was played by Fred Thompson. For those of you who don't know Fred Thompson, he was a longtime character actor in Hollywood. He was a United States senator, and he ran for president in 2008, I believe.
yeah, it's
And
either 8 or 12. Yeah,
yeah, um, and he hires Hector Elizondo's character, who his nickname is Straight Arrow.
right. He's such a honest man that he's the only person who could possibly run this program, even as you have the dean trying to undercut him at every turn.
Yeah, yeah, and then of course he brings in Robert Loggia's character to be the defensive coordinator. For those of you who know, and I'll try not to get too far into the weeds when it comes to football because I used to watch football all the time.
Mhm.
So you have like so with football there are two, well there are actually three, but so you have offense, defense, and special teams. And so Hector Elizondo, he says, "Well, I'll run the offense," and he tells Robert Loggia he'll run the defense. Uh, but problem they quickly run into is that they actually don't have it because of certain academic issues because they all have to make grades. They all have to
Mhm.
have a certain grade point average in order to play, and they can't cheat in any way. Uh, so they realize they lose like three or four guys because of their
I think
grades.
it's like 8 guys. Like
Eight guys.
it's a bloodbath in that scene, as I
Yeah,
recall.
yeah, yeah. So they're like, oh god, we don't have enough guys to fill the roster. So then they decide, well, we'll just have them all play offense and defense, which does happen. But it's a very old school way of football. Actually, I think they do that in arena football.
Mm.
Um, but yeah,
Very rough on the team.
yes, it is. Yeah, and uh, that's actually one aspect of of the movie that the movie gets wrong is that if you have guys like that playing for that long on both
Mhm.
sides of the ball, they're going to get tired and they're going to get hurt.
Right.
And that's one of the part of the movie that kind of bothered me was that none of those guys in this movie got hurt. And I'm like, okay, you're going to have at least three or four, maybe five guys who are going to get injured at some point.
Well, like they kept having them end games with like clear amounts of blood on like seeping through their uniforms, but
Yeah,
like no lasting consequences of it.
right. Yeah, that part of it was very unrealistic. But I guess we should go back to Bacula's character.
Yeah, he's the main character because he's living out his dream,
Mhm.
which quickly becomes a nightmare because they just get killed.
Yeah, yeah, and of course he's not a young man. He's in his mid 30s, which even a professional quarterback, playing in football in his mid 30s, wears them out pretty. They get worn out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Uh,
Uh,
so see, you've got a classic sports scenario here where you have an in theory lovable bunch of losers who have to come together as a team.
yeah,
There are some weird aspects to how this movie is paced. It feels like they're still building the team at a half hour in,
yeah,
at least.
yeah,
Like they only introduce Sinbad's character pretty late into it. Um, they bring in Kathy Ireland's character, who is a kicker,
mhm,
pretty late into it.
yeah,
And the movie has like a very I wonder if it's just because like what was seen as wacky in 1991 is different than what's wacky now, but it feels like they were expecting some of the casting choices to make up some difference. Like,
Yeah.
oh, they have a woman on the team. Oh, haha, there's a Samoan guy, and his name means the run to the liver, even though he is quite large himself.
Yes.
How droll.
Yeah.
And surely you love the comedic stylings of Sinbad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
He was okay.
yeah. He was probably the most consistently funny character in the movie, which is a problem.
Yeah. 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 Um,
Like, oh, it also has a young Jason Bateman who I didn't recognize while watching the movie, but it makes sense. Yeah,
yeah. 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 And his character is he's the son of a one of the boosters on the team. And
right.
yeah.
The biggest guy in town.
Right. Yeah. Which again, if you know anything about football, especially college football, every most of the major universities they have like 4 or 5 really rich dudes who just throw money at the at these football programs.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Which is part of what got this team in trouble in the first place.
right. Yeah. Yeah, and a little side note too. The stuff that got this team in trouble, like the paying the players and giving them gifts and stuff. That's perfectly legal now in in the NCAA. They could do that.
Right. Well, I think part of what changed that was actually NCAA football for like on various video game systems,
Oh
because
yeah.
it's like, wait a minute, so you can use my likeness, make a game that makes you hundreds of millions of dollars, but I legally can't profit from my likeness, but the NCAA does.
Yeah.
The hell sense does that make?
None. But yeah, so yeah, the movie basically just focuses on this team just being the lovable losers and
Lovable
lovable, yeah, lovable.
with air quotes.
Yeah. Um, I mentioned the replacements earlier. This movie kind of almost like an early version of the replacements because the tropes are very similar and the humor is kind of similar as well. But it was just like there were times where I'm kind of like they something would happen and be like, am I supposed to laugh?
That was a joke, right? Like,
Yeah,
and also there's just a lot of the movie where it strains credulity, but not in like a, it doesn't, it's like it's stupid enough to be stupid, but not stupid enough to be funny.
yeah,
Like there's a bit where the dean brings in the football team from the nearby prison
oh yeah,
to practice with, and they just destroy them. And like they
yeah,
had asked, what were, before one of them got tackled to the ground, he asked, what this big beefy guy,
yeah,
what were you in for? He smashes him to the ground and goes, computer fraud.
yeah,
Which is like, well, in 1991, like computer fraud would be rare enough that I can see the humor of a big, strong guy um, being involved with that, but like
yeah,
that isn't quite the bon mot you think it is.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think the whole reason for that scene it was to bring in all of these real life professional football players.
Okay.
So yeah, because I mean there was Dick Butkus, Earl Campbell, I think I said Jerry Rice, Jim Kelly, uh, yeah, a lot of past and at the time current players. So some of those guys were still playing when this movie was made, but yeah, I'm convinced that's the only reason for that scene was just to give those guys cameos.
Yeah. Okay. So that now makes the scene make a bit more sense, but
Yeah,
like, there were a couple of lines that made me smirk, but I don't think I laughed once.
yeah,
If I was going to give a line to anything, like I said, Sinbad was the funniest character in the movie because he was just like a jaded science TA, and like
yeah,
like at one point he's showing the class a film reel,
yeah,
and like, yeah, will you learn anything from this video? No, but I was forced to watch it when I was a freshman, and so now are you.
yeah.
Um, I'll also say that like, yeah, just like it's just unfortunately not very good. Like,
No, it's not. Yeah, and Yeah, and like you said, they were clearly trying to capitalize on the success of Major League, trying to make a Major League, but with football. I think it probably would have been better if it had been set in a professional, if it was a professional football team instead of a college team.
Yeah, because they didn't like really take advantage of it being. Oh, I'll tell you why it would be a college team.
Uh,
Way cheaper to shoot.
oh yeah, good
You just
point.
have to have the school agree to lend you their resources instead of having to convince an NFL team.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah, and and NFL is pretty strict when it comes to like filming stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that's really funny about this movie is that a movie that I know I did watch at least once with my family is it's like in 1998, Scott Bakula made an almost identical movie actually in the Major League series called Major League Back to the Minors. Although he was the coach, I believe he was the coach in that one.
Okay.
But it's weird that he ended up in like two movies that were so similar to one another, which just added to my confusion about whether I had seen the movie before or not.
Okay. That makes sense.
Like, and am I remembering bits of Back to the Minors? Or
Yeah, yeah.
now, if we haven't completely turned you off of this movie, it is available to stream on Paramount Plus. Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Paramount Plus. Yeah.
yeah. But man, that you could do so much better. Like, just like I'm not the hugest fan of
Yeah.
Major League, but it performs the formula so much better than this.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Plus, it has Emilio Estevez's brother, the crazy one,
Charlie Sheen. Yeah.
has Charlie Sheen wearing big dorky glasses. So
Yeah,
that's just that's probably a better sight gag than anything in this movie.
yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of that, one aspect we forgot to mention was with Rob Schneider is in this. He's the public address announcer, and he's the one calling the games. And you kind of almost forget he's there.
Yes, when it's like you know what this is? This is like Rob Schneider in 1981, reasonably big star. Was he on? He was on SNL at that point, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you have all these people who, in theory, are big gets. Like, oh man, it's the guy from Quantum Leap,
Yeah.
and we have the Robert Loggia, who
Yeah.
Family Guy fans will mostly know from that one joke where he just kept saying his name over and over again.
Yeah.
Robert Loggia.
Robert
Uh,
Loggia.
R as in Robert Loggia. O as in oh my God, is that Robert Loggia?
Yeah.
That bit is also funnier than anything in this movie. But like, yeah,
Yeah.
we got Robert Loggia, we got that guy from SNL that everyone likes, Rob Schneider. And
Yeah.
we've got the Sinbad. Right?
Yeah.
Clearly, we have a successful movie, and we also have Kathy Ireland. People like looking at Kathy Ireland.
Yeah. She was the Sports Illustrated swimsuit cover model. Yeah.
This movie should work. It does not. No.
No. No. No. Sadly, it did not.
So, for those of you keeping score at home, the most positively reviewed thing we had this week was silly, tropey anime fluff. So, not a good week out here, folks.
No, it wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I think we've said all we need to say.
indeed.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, ring the bell, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next week, everybody.
Time to go hit the showers.
Yes.
Daniel Parker presents from the team that brought you Angels Awakening. After 100 years, Henry Hatcher is awoken to fight his mortal enemy. But he is not alone.